Good morning, class. Today we're going to talk about a very, very dense topic. It's going to seem like a little bit longer of a video, but we're going to go through a lot in this time period. So here we go. Uh, we previously talked about the attack on Pearl Harbor. I'm going to cover basically a little bit of the prelude, which happened before, and then all the way straight through the war in the Pacific, as we call it. Now, in the time period around 1930s, late 1930s, early 1940s, Japanese became very, very imperialistic. As you know, imperialism simply means is trying to expand one's country or territory through the use of military force or diplomacy. So they attempted to move into China. They attempted to take over what is now like Indonesia and all the little islands, and they just wanted to make their empire be the largest country in the world. Not very unfamiliar to the time period. The United States attempted it. Hitler is currently attempting it in this time period. He's moving in Europe. They want to take over all of Asia. The way the Japanese went about it, they typically killed innocent women and children during the time period. There were a few key events. We're not going to dive into specifics. And instead of the United States doing anything about it or jumping in as the world's policeman, remember we're still in the Great Depression. Many Americans are still feeling the pain of World War I and the number of American lives who died. So FDR decides to pass an embargo. The main product he passes the embargo on is oil. He stopped sending all materials to Japan, and we were Japan's number one source of oil. So to pass this embargo, it definitely hurt Japan. They ended up looking elsewhere, and they became allies with the Axis power. So they joined up with Italy and Germany in 1940 and officially joined World War II. As a result of the embargo, a lot of people blame the embargo. I think it was a multifaceted issue. As a result of the embargo, the Japanese decide to attack Pearl Harbor. The attack on Pearl Harbor happened Sunday, December 7th, 1941. They sent more than 300 fighter pilots, many of whom were called kamikaze. Kamikaze. Now, for those of you who don't know what a kamikaze is, that is a fighter pilot whose sole mission was to die. And what I mean by this is many times in the time period, the fighter pilot would only be given enough gas to make it one way to their destination. They would also be sealed in to the plane. The purpose of this was when they run out of bullets, they don't have enough gas to get back, they know they're going to die. Their main goal is to crash their plane into a target and make themselves like a human bomb. And when it was all said and done, about 2,400 Americans died. And again, this happened on a Sunday, and many of the crews were actually still sleeping. Unfortunately, they're entombed. They never made it out of the ships. When you visit Pearl Harbor, I visited. I'm going to show you some pictures here. When you visit, you have to take a little ferry out, and you can see that you basically stand on a barge that is over one of the ships. Part of the ship is still, many of the ships are still there. They're entombed. It's almost like a sanctuary. And as I was standing here, there were probably 300 people, and not a single person was talking. It was the most, it was solitude. It was just knowing how many Americans died in this specific spot was saddening and heartfelt. You can see parts of the ships are still coming up out of the water. In fact, one of the ships is still leaking oil. And again, they don't want to disturb it because they view it as a final resting spot for so many Americans who drowned and weren't able to make it out. The following day, that Monday, the following day, FDR presented his very, very infamous speech, a day that would live forever in infamy. And this is where he officially asks Congress to declare war.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
After that speech, Congress does eventually vote on it, and we decide to officially declare war on Japan. The United States enters World War II at this point. There are two aspects of World War II. There is war in Europe, fighting in Europe, and there's fighting in the Pacific. One is against Germany and the Nazi Party. The other is obviously against Japan. We're going to focus primarily on fighting in the Pacific. We practice what is called island hopping. So because there are so many islands in the Pacific, the United States basically tried to attack one island at a time. This was problematic for the Americans simply because the Japanese believe in a very, very rich tradition of honor, and they are going to fight to the death. They viewed surrender as an ultimate failure and shame upon one's family. So they're going to build tunnels on these islands. They're going to dig in and harvest in and never, ever surrender, which is going to lead to massive amounts of American life on almost all of the islands in the Pacific. We are going to have the turning point. The turning point of the war in the Pacific is the Battle of Midway. After that, there are only two major battles left. We have Iwo Jima and Okinawa. Iwo Jima is a very, very famous photo of Marines holding up a flag. I'm sure you've seen it. It looks a lot like this. This was a very, very devastating battle only because the Japanese were entrenched in the island. They built several underground tunnels. The stone was made of sulfur. It was very smelly. So as the Marines came onto the island, it almost looked like it was an empty island. And before you know it, the Japanese would jump out, shoot a little bit, and then hide back in the tunnels and move somewhere else to attack again later. When it was all said and done, only 200 Japanese survived Iwo Jima, obviously because they believe in fighting to the death. The final battle in the Pacific was Okinawa. It eventually ended the fighting in the Pacific in June of 1945. Instead of the two generals surrendering, they committed ritual suicide by killing themselves instead of surrendering to the United States. So again, key takeaways. Pearl Harbor brings the United States in. Battle of Midway, and we practice island hopping. That's how we fight the Japanese. The Battle of Midway is the turning point in the war in the Pacific, again, because there are two fronts to World War II. Okinawa is the last major battle. And many people believe because the Japanese have this never surrender approach, many people believe that is why Truman decided to drop the atomic bombs, because he believed that the fighting would always continue. Again, we're going to dive more into this in another unit. Other than that, if anyone has any questions, I hope everybody has a great day. Enjoy the nice weather.